There are things I'll never say out loud, not because I'm afraid to speak, but because I don't think anyone really wants to hear the answer. People assume I'm guarded, cold maybe. But the truth is simpler. There are fears inside me built over years, not weeks, and they don't scream. They whisper, and they whisper most loudly when someone gets close. Let me tell you what most men won't. We fear not being enough. We don't say it out loud, but it's always there just beneath the surface. That quiet fear that maybe what we offer won't be enough. Not enough success, not enough charm, not enough emotional depth, not enough something. We enter relationships trying to show up as steady men providers, protectors, partners, but somewhere deep inside, there's a voice that whispers, she'll see through it eventually. It doesn't matter how much we've built, how loyal we are, how steady we show up. There's still that gnawing thought, what if she gets bored? What if she compares me to someone louder, funnier, richer, and I lose without ever knowing I was in a race? And the worst part? We don't ask for reassurance, because we're taught to power through, two men up. So we hide it. We stay quiet when we feel inadequate. We overcompensate with work, with silence, with performance. We try harder but say less, because it feels safer to pretend we're fine than to say, I don't know if I'm what you really want. That fear of not being enough doesn't come from ego. It comes from wanting to matter deeply and quietly fearing we never will. We fear being judged for our silence. People think silence means we don't care, but for most men, silence is a language, a shield, a survival tool. We don't go silent because we have nothing to say. We go silent because what we want to say doesn't feel safe anymore. My father once told me, sometimes a man doesn't speak because the last time he did, he wasn't heard, he was studied. That line stuck. In relationships, we fear saying the wrong thing. We fear being misunderstood. We fear that if we speak our full truth, we'll be labeled too cold, too distant, too intense, not emotionally available. So we hold back. We rehearse in our heads. We pick the sentence apart before we say it. Then more often than not, we just swallow it. And when we're finally asked, why don't you open up more? We don't say, because I've learned silence hurts less than being judged. But that's the truth. It's not that we can't talk. It's that we've learned talking comes with a cost, especially when the world hears a man's voice as either too much or not enough. So we fear it, not the words themselves, but the moment they're turned into weapons. We fear being seen as weak for needing reassurance. There's a moment in every relationship when we wonder, am I still seen? And yes, even the strongest men feel it. But we rarely ask. We fear the look, that slight head tilt, the confusion, the why are you asking that response. Because somewhere along the way, we were taught that needing reassurance makes us needy. That asking, are we okay, makes us insecure. That saying, I feel distant lately, makes us fragile. So instead, we internalize. We scan for clues. We read body language. We overthink small silences. We watch for the way she hugs us. Is it tighter? Is it fading? And when something feels off, we don't ask. We adjust. We try harder. We give more. Not because we're disparate, but because we're terrified of the answer. Terrified, she'll say, I didn't even notice you were struggling. Or worse, you're overthinking again. So we pretend we're good. That we don't need to hear, I love you, more than once a month. That it doesn't bother us when affection fades. That we're solid. But deep down, we're just hoping for a moment, any moment where she looks at us like we're still worth holding close. And the fear, it isn't about needing too much. It's about needing something, and not feeling allowed to ask. We fear that our value has an expiration date. When we're younger, we're told our worth comes from our potential, and we believe it. We push, build, prove. We think, once I reach this level, once I earn that respect, once I'm stable, I'll be seen, I'll be enough. But no one tells you that even after you build the life, the world still whispers, what else? Especially in relationships. You begin to wonder, am I still interesting if I'm not reinventing myself? Am I only valuable when I'm useful? Because men age too. Not just in the mirror, but in how the world sees us. Younger men are praised for ambition. Older men are told to be content. And in love, we feel it. When the spark dims, when our jokes don't land, when she looks at us like we've stopped evolving, it hits harder than most things. Because we don't fear aging. We fear becoming invisible in the eyes of the person who once looked at us like we were the whole sky. The fear isn't getting older. It's becoming irrelevant quietly, slowly, with no warning. That's what keeps us up. Not wrinkles, but being replaced before we even know we've faded. We fear being loved for the wrong reasons. Every man hopes to be seen, truly seen. But sometimes, when we're finally loved, we realize it's not us they love. It's the version we represent. The provider, the protector, the stable one, the quiet one, the man who doesn't make a fuss, and for a while that feels okay. Because any love feels better than none. But then it starts to ache. When you notice she lights up more for what you do than who you are. When the compliments center around your reliability, not your soul. When you feel more like a role than a person. It's subtle. You're not disrespected, but you're not celebrated either. You're appreciated but not felt. And deep down, you fear, if I lost the things I provide, would she still want me? If I stopped holding everything together, would I still be seen as lovable? That fear grows quietly, not because we're insecure, but because we know what it feels like to be useful, but not adored. A man can carry a lot, but being carried for once would feel like love, and we fear we'll never know that feeling in return. We fear fading in her eyes. It doesn't happen all at once. First, the way she used to look at you that lingers a little less. Then the laughter you shared becomes more polite than real. Then the touch becomes mechanical, more duty than desire. And you start wondering, when did I become background noise? You haven't changed. You still show up, still do the things you promised, still protect and provide. But something in her gaze has dimmed. And the worst part? She doesn't say it. She doesn't complain. She doesn't fight. She just stops seeing you. And that's what cuts deepest. Not rejection, not rage, but the quiet retreat of affection, the slow leak of wonder. We fear it more than we admit. Because men don't ask, do you still look at me like you used to? We just notice when she stops. And we carry that loss in silence. Not because we expect passion forever, but because we hoped to remain worth seeing. Not just in the light, but in the little moments, too. We fear not being allowed to be human. There's a quiet pressure on men to always hold it together, to be the anchor, the constant, the one who doesn't flinch when things get hard. And most of the time, we don't mind. We're wired to protect, to endure. But deep down, there's a fear that never leaves. What happens the day I crack a little? Not fall apart, not collapse. Just show fatigue. Just say, I'm not okay. What happens when we stop performing strength and start revealing our humanness? Will she still respect us? Will she lean in or pull back? Because we've seen it before. A moment of realness met with discomfort. A vulnerable truth answered with silence. Or worse, with cold judgment. So we hold back. We get sick and say, I'm fine. We get overwhelmed and say, it's just work. We grieve and say, I just need space. Not because we don't feel, but because we're terrified that if we ever stopped being the strong one, we'd stop being lovable. We fear that once we admit we're human, we'll no longer be seen as men. And in that twisted fear, we slowly become less of ourselves, to protect the image she expects. We fear that our love will be taken for granted. When a man loves deeply, it's not flashy. It's not loud. It's not something he announces every day. It shows up in small ways. The early morning coffee. The car quietly filled with gas. The did you eat text that replaces I miss you. But here's the truth we rarely say. We fear it won't be noticed. That our steady presence will become part of the background, assumed, expected, unthanked. Because once love becomes a routine, people stop seeing the labor it takes to remain consistent. And the fear? It grows when we hear, you're always like this, it's nothing special. Or worse, when she starts comparing us to someone who offers grand gestures but can't sustain them. We don't need applause. We don't need fanfare. But we do need to feel felt, to know that our effort doesn't disappear just because it's predictable. We fear that the more dependable we are, the more invisible our love becomes. And over time, that fear hardens into distance. Not out of resentment, but out of exhaustion. Even a strong man gets tired of giving what no one remembers receiving. We fear repeating the same emotional patterns. No one wants to carry the past into the future, but most men do. Not because we're careless, but because we were never taught how to unpack the weight. We fear that we'll shut down again, that we'll love too hard, too fast again, that we'll chase approval from someone who can never give it again. Even when we find someone kind, someone new, the fear lingers. What if I mess it up the same way? What if I freeze when things get too close? What if she pushes a button I didn't know I still had? And we don't talk about it. We just start avoiding the places that feel too familiar. Sometimes we sabotage. Sometimes we retreat. Sometimes we try so hard not to repeat the past that we forget how to fully live in the present. The fear isn't that we haven't grown. It's that growth doesn't always guarantee healing. We fear that no matter how far we've come, we're still one emotional trigger away from becoming the man we swore we'd never be again. And that fear keeps us cautious, even in the arms of someone safe. We fear that there will be nothing left for us. We give. That's how most men show love, through presence, provision, protection. We give our time, our focus, our energy, and when someone matters, we quietly place their needs above our own. Not because we're trying to be martyrs, but because it's how we were taught to care. But deep down, there's a fear most of us carry. If I keep giving like this, what's left for me? Because somewhere along the way, we lose pieces of ourselves. The hobbies that used to bring us joy, the quiet rituals that centered us, the friendships that kept us grounded, even the music we loved. And it happened slowly. We skip the gym to solve her bad day. We drop plans to meet her family. We bend our routines to hold space for hers. And at first, it feels like love. But over time, we start to miss ourselves. And the fear grows louder. If this ends, I won't know who I am anymore. If she stays, I'm afraid I'll keep disappearing. We want to love fully, but not at the cost of vanishing. We fear that in loving someone deeply, we'll forget how to love ourselves at all. We fear that if we walk away, no one will understand why. There's a kind of heartbreak only men know. It's not the loud kind, not the dramatic goodbye, not the public fallout. It's the quiet choice to leave something that no longer feels right, even when nothing bad happened. We fear that if we walk away from a relationship that looks fine on the outside, the world will see us as cold, as immature, as the one who gave up. Because how do you explain leaving when she didn't cheat, didn't scream, didn't destroy? How do you say, she was good, but I couldn't breathe. I smiled every day and died a little underneath it. I wasn't angry, just gone. That's a hard story to tell. So we stay, longer than we should, just to avoid the misunderstanding. Because we know, people won't ask about the weight. They'll only look at the surface. And in a world that still expects men to be lucky to have love, we fear the shame of saying, it wasn't enough not because she lacked, but because I did. We fear that choosing ourselves will always be mistaken for selfishness, even when it's the most honest thing we've done. There are fears that men speak of in jokes, in silence, in sideways glances. And then there are fears we bury so deep. We almost convince ourselves they're not there, but they are. In the way we second-guess our worth, in the way we keep loving quietly, hoping someone notices, in the way we leave parts of ourselves behind, thinking it's the cost of being chosen. And maybe the greatest fear of all is that we'll carry all of this and never say it out loud, that no one will ever know how heavy it was, how much we tried, how deeply we felt, how much we wanted to be loved not for our performance, but for our presence. So if you've seen yourself in any of this, you're not soft, you're not weak, you're not broken, you're human. And maybe finally, you're being honest about it, because we can't heal what we keep hiding. And strength isn't in the silence, it's in the courage to whisper, I feel this too. So say it, even if just in the comments, even if just to yourself. You're not alone, not in these fears, not anymore. Comment below, that one hit me hard. Or simply, I've felt this. Some men never had a space to speak. Let this be the beginning.